Welcome back to From Book to Business. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us. My name is Trina Boice, and I'm a best-selling author of 30 books and an author writing coach. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. Today, I have a guest who is an expert editor. Her name is Elizabeth Suggs.
Hello.
Yay! Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
My pleasure. It's an honor to have you. So, for those who are watching, tell us, how did you even get started as an editor?
Well, so I started as an editor a while back when I was in college at UVU. And long story short, that it was news articles more, but then eventually in the last few years, I've been really focusing on editing in books. And then now, like this last, I think in March, it will be 12 months that I have had hosted a feedback and editing and writing group. So yeah, just really digging my heels in. But yeah, it started way back like 10 years ago. But yeah.
So, were you always passionate about words?
I was, when I was 5 years old, I remember I was in kindergarten. They had us do a story and I was writing it and I was like, this is the funnest thing ever.
Oh.
And I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. And so I have written my entire life. I have a box of they're called sparkle teeth because, so the sparkle teeth series with sparkle tooth and Tara the fish. Those are my two like main, I did like series of them.
These were books that you wrote when you were a little girl?
Yeah, so I have them, and I my first chapter book was the magic book, and it was like a horror book with a good side and the evil side. So I have like all these saved. But yeah, it started when I was 5, and it's only just ramped up from here. And now I'm just like, everyone can write. We can make everyone be writers if they want to be. So that's where I've come.
Well, that's actually really good to hear because I know some people are like, oh, I'm not a writer. I could never learn how to write. But you think everybody has a book in them?
Yeah, I think if you have the capacity to create a world in your head, you have a capacity to create a world on paper. Because what is a world if not just, I mean, it's images, but you can also make it into words. So I think the act of putting it on paper, there might be like a stress behind that. And I think that's where writer's block tends to come in. But it's just writing out what you see in your head. If you have that image, like it's just, you imagine this castle. Okay, well, let's write the castle, but let's not just write it about like, I saw a castle. Let's start going into the description of it. So it's just feeling like you have that ability. But yeah, everyone has the capacity. It's just getting over that stress.
So I'm not a fiction author. All of my books are nonfiction, and I'm so impressed with people who can see castles and create worlds because I don't know that I can do that.
Yeah.
I can pump out nonfiction though, for sure. So, but I would love to write fiction one day, but because to me that seems like real writing to be able to create a world that doesn't really exist. I'm
Yeah.
so amazed by that. So where do you get your ideas? Do they just come to you, or do you do research, or both?
So they do come to me, but it's not as if, like, if I'm thinking about something, I might have another idea that I set aside and I'm like, okay, I need to do this later. For some people, they do want to do research and they get inspiration by going to different places, meeting new people, or even there's some like, generators that will just like, put a whole bunch of words out and then you're like, okay, how can I make that into a story? One way that I think really helps people create a world, and this could even help any kind of writer, like if you're even trying to do a news article and trying to get the right angle. But if you close your eyes and start to think of one word that might, so if it's like a news article, you want to find one word that relates to that article. But if it's a story and you just find one word that relates to the genre that you want to write, so if it's contemporary, kind of like modern, or if it's fantasy with dragons, or it's romance, you just have to find one word. And I like to imagine that word, bridging out into something real. Like, so if I imagine, okay, there's a bridge, I'm going to think about that bridge. And so if it's a romance, I'm going to walk over that bridge, and now over that bridge, there's a person waiting, right? But if that's harder for you, you can put it on a piece of paper and have it as if bridge, you have you circle that bridge, and then from that you spider out into different words, and that can help inspiration.
That's a really good tip. And I am a very visual learner. And so I draw things out. I have to write out my outline and see it visually. I know some authors will put sticky notes on the wall, which I've done to organize how I want things to flow, so visually and tactically I can move things around. So again, I'm so impressed with people who can just do all of that in their heads. So you mentioned like writing a news report or something like that. You do obviously lots of fiction editing, but you also work for companies and business writing. Tell us how different writing those styles might be, and as an editor, what you might look for good writing in those different types of settings.
Ooh, okay. Well, they're very different, very, very different. I think that my first years going into news and business and all of that sort of writing, AP style or even APA, that is very different from creating a world. And some people just don't have what it takes to do both without doing a lot of practice. I think you just have to do more practice. But with business or news articles, you need to focus on one central point, and you have to say it really, really quickly. So in news, there's the upside down pyramid, and the most important thing is going to be said all at the very top. So you have the very top of the pyramid and then going down. You're going to say like the man, he stole something from the bank. You're going to tell about his name and everything. Get us all the information. So as we continue going, if we don't finish the article, we still know exactly what happened, and we just, get extra nuggets. And that's the same with business writing. You want to be able to say the most important thing, and you want it to be very clear, and you want it to be very concise. People, especially like one of the companies I work for, it's fintech, it's financial technology. It's people, customers or anything, they want to know exactly what they need. They don't want all this fluff because they don't really probably want to read that. They just want to get right to the point. So you need to quickly just give them as much as you can without overwhelming them. And it's a bit of an art, it's a puzzle, right? You have to put in the puzzle pieces. With fiction, there is more fluff, right? There's more of this idea of let's describe, and there's different writing styles, but it's the idea of like, let's describe the world, let's describe the characters, let's take our time to get
the journey.
But the business writing, news articles, while you will see it sometimes in news, there's hard news and there's soft news. Hard news, you're going to get a lot of stuff at one point. So you're going to hear that, the man stole something from the bank. He's 26 years old, and then his name. And then you're going to maybe, after you get that little paragraph, there's going to be like a little sentence to grab you. And then from underneath, maybe a quote, right? But soft news, there might be a little more fluff. And that is a writing style. It's not used that often because people tend to want that hard thing. They want the immediate information, because while people are readers, a lot of readers find their business and news online, and online readers tend to not care as much, like, I don't know, I don't want to be negative, but it's more of just like, you're so used to something quick that if you don't have that, you just get bored.
Even in news, like in news TV shows, back in the day, like when I was growing up, the news bite was like 11 seconds. It's shrinking because we have such short attention spans, and not just listening or watching the news, let alone reading it, where you got to get in and out. We got places to go and things to do and all that kind of stuff. Exactly. So concise, that's a really great way to describe the difference. As opposed to fiction, where it's all about enjoying the journey and tasting
we want to get that journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So as you do all of your editing work with writers, we'll kind of go back to the fiction type of writer. What are some of the common mistakes or the common writing issues that you see over and over again, especially new writers who haven't been published yet? Of course, it can still happen once somebody's published, but somebody
Sure.
who's trying to write their first book, what are common mistakes?
So there are a few common mistakes like that I've seen recently, and the top three I would think are story structure, and we can get into that in a little bit. The too much of a more tell than show, and what do I mean by that? Tell or telly is when you say I felt this way, or it's there's no sensory information. It's more about you as the author are telling me as the reader how to feel, when in reality you as the author should be giving me an avenue to feel a certain way. So instead of telling me that something is slow, maybe you're going to describe how slow the feet are going. Maybe they're moving through molasses, or something like that. There's nothing wrong with telly, and sometimes it's kind of hard to get out of that realm for a particular paragraph. But it's the same with passive voice. If you do it too consistently, it gets fatiguing, and readers don't, they're not, their interest isn't captured. So story structure, telly, the tense changes, that's another thing. Tense change is a big one, where someone who's, I don't see it often with past tense, but with present tense, authors who use present tense might slip into past tense. And I mean, I prefer past tense. I think it's the most natural. When we talk, we tend to speak in past tense, but and I think that's where the problem is, because they're used to this, past tense way of thinking. But there's nothing wrong with present tense. It's just making sure you keep one tense, or readers are going to be confused, like, wait, what, did this happen in the past? But that person was just doing that. So that's a big one. And then, yeah, so those are the top three. And then the fourth, I guess, would be the passive voice, as I was mentioning. So, and passive voice is just, it's fine, but it's more, we need to get the active voice because we need a stronger sentence.
Give us an example of passive versus active, because people who are watching this are going, oh, I remember learning about this in high school, but I don't know. What does that mean?
So the difference between active voice and passive voice. So active voice, I do my homework. Passive voice, my homework is done. While neither are grammatically incorrect, one is more of a strong sentence and the other is weaker. So passive is just weaker. And so if you have four different examples of passive voice in one paragraph, that's going to be a really weak paragraph, and it's going to fatigue the reader. And the reader is going to, I mean, maybe the reader's used to that, but if I tend to read a lot of passive voice, I might glaze over it, and I might be kind of losing the message the reader is trying to convey. And that's the problem with passive. So,
Yeah, that's a really, really good tip, especially because I think writers, we just start writing. I'm going like this because I'm typing on my keyboard without thinking, looking at it as a paragraph. And that makes a really good editor, one who's really paying attention to the structure, not only for the entire story, but within each paragraph. That's really a good tip. And then about the telly tip, I think that's really good advice. I review movies.
yeah.
Shameless plug, subscribe to Movie Review Mom. But it works the same in movies. I hate exposition where the characters are telling you, well, this is what happened and this is how I feel. And you're like, don't tell me, show me, let me experience it. So
Yeah.
it works the same in film as well as in literature. And of course, a lot of film comes from literature. So that's also another fantastic tip. And
Yeah.
then let's talk about story structure.
Yeah. So story structure. Would you believe me if I said that there were only 6 types of stories?
Yes, I would, because
Yes.
it's the same thing in movies too.
Yep.
Well, there are different types of themes and elements, but yeah, the basic story. So tell us what they are.
Okay. So just kind of going down the list, there's one, which is rise, two, fall, three, fall, rise, four, rise, fall, five, fall, rise, fall, and six, rise, fall, rise. And what do I mean by those? So in a story, something that's going to be a rise is going to continue to go upwards. It's the rags to riches type of story. A fall is going to be a tragedy. Think Romeo and Juliet. Fall, rise, fall. Man in the Whole story, kind of, all's well that ends well, something by Shakespeare. Um, Rise, fall, think of the Icarus story. A lot of morality stories are this way. The fall, rise, fall. So with the fall, rise, fall, this is the Oedipus story where it's, he leaves his house, comes back, ends up marrying his mother, and then realizes that, and so he falls away, right? Then there's the rise, fall, rise. That is going to be a really common story in the, at least what I've seen in America with fairy tales or anything where it's like the person, the character is happy and they have a good life and that, and then all of a sudden everything just goes bad. And then over a course of whatever the trials and, they have to do these tribulations, they end up going to have a happy ending. And so that's kind of the idea. And while it might be tempting to do something out of that, I don't really, though these are the successful ways to create a story. I don't really see a way of getting out of this area. I guess you could add in more, but really the basic readers, viewers of movies or listeners, any audience pretty much enjoys this story structure. And it's easy to like do this because it's fine to be similar to this. I know there's a lot of writers I know there's a lot of writers, but that do this. Maybe there are other, screenwriters or singers or guitarists, anything like that, where they might want to use something so unique to them that they are afraid to, read other literature or even maybe go off of this story structure. But the thing is the audience wants certain things. They've always wanted certain things. This story structure, this 6-story structure, just pick one because this is something hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Like when we first started telling stories, we first started using these story structures. This is what people like. And so you shouldn't feel a writer's block to something when, it's just simple you're not copying, you're just doing the standard template, and that's not bad at all because your creativity comes through how your story or your song develops, not how it's outlined or how it's like structured, I guess. I don't know how to explain that more, but
Yeah. So if a writer is trying to put together a book,
Mhm.
how long should they expect this editing process to take? Let's say they've picked the story structure, they think it's awesome, and now they bring their masterpiece to you.
Yeah.
How does that process work, and what time frame should they expect?
So if you go to an editor is going to need average 3 months. You shouldn't really have to get something much longer than that. And it's depending on the length of your story and how in depth the edits, it might be able to be less than the 3 months, but generally you can kind of expect your story to be within 3 months. At least that's kind of what I promise. And so once you get those edits, depending on if, you worked out something where, you edited whatever I asked you to edit or what you agreed with. And then we had a kind of a back and forth, I edit something, you edit, and just to make sure it's really fine tuned. That can be another like month or two, just depending on how in depth you need it to be. And that's, it's really based off the person. But generally, once you've gotten the editor, then you want to get the beta readers. And beta readers, well, they are very, very much needed for stories. They, usually they're not paid. And so because they're not paid, you really, well, you should expect something. You can't expect the same timeliness. And some readers, they will push things off, or they just have a busy life because they have to do, things that, their work and everything. So with beta readers, hopefully you can get that within 3 to 6 months, but it really depends on your beta readers and what you're willing to do for them, or if they're just doing it for free. So once you get all of those edits, you got your beta readers, now you want to get into publishing. And so I feel like the whole process up to that point is probably going to be 6 months, and then the publishing, depending on what you want to do, traditional or non-traditional, that can take even longer, because if you're doing traditional, you need to go to agents. You can't go to the publishers because they will probably just reject you outright, because they don't accept the submissions outside of agents. And a lot of agents will reject you, not because you're bad, but because they just have too many writers. And so that can take a long time. Sometimes that takes, years. And that sounds really defeating, but it shouldn't, because it really is just, it's a luck of the draw, right? So that's why I would suggest doing non-traditional, like I'm doing. But then that's the marketing, right? And then you have to market. And we've talked about this, where you're probably going to need 12 months to market, so you can get your forward, you can get your endorsements, your reviews. And then that kind of also goes into your beta readers as well. But yeah, I would expect after that after the book is done, it's probably going to take 12 months. And that's being safe. That's because that's you really, maybe traveling to different conferences, maybe networking, because it's all about networking. Writers will buy other writers' books, right? Because they're friends, and that's one of the big things too. You want to have your friends talk about it, because then they talk to other people about it. But yes, it's a long time. But if you want it to be, and the thing is with traditional publishing, you could get an agent, within, because usually agents will get back to you within like 1 to 2 months. And so maybe you'll get lucky and you get that person right then after that. But generally, I think it's one of those, the entire book process is one where it does take a long time. Just as, it took as long to do just writing the book. So.
Right. And I think a lot of times writers will write a book and they're all excited and they think it's ready to sell. And as you know, the launch process is very detailed and time consuming.
Yeah.
You've got to have all the little pieces put in place before you just throw it out to the world. And a lot of people will do that. They'll write a book and throw it out on Amazon with no launch or marketing strategy. And that's a mistake as well. But back to, I've got a question about the beta readers. As an editor, do you find beta readers for your writers? Or do you say, now the book is edited, you find some beta readers and let's talk about their feedback when it comes? How do you?
Yeah. So I think it really, you have to go towards your genre, because while your mom is a great reader, if she doesn't like fantasy, then you're not going to get enough of what you need actually out of that, because she's going to miss things. Even if she enjoyed the book, if she's not an active reader in that genre, then what's the point? You want to have, I tend to suggest maybe 6 beta readers. One who is, you could do someone that's just Joe Schmo. I don't really recommend it, but I would do people of the fantasy realm, and then, or whoever is in your genre. So say it's fantasy. And then I would do one person who doesn't write, who reads, but he's just, just what everybody does, that he's in your fantasy genre. Then you could do a person who is an editor or an academic of some kind. And then you kind of want to go off of certain characteristics that you want focused on. So if you have the editor or academic, while they're not going to be editing your book, that's a big thing. They're not editing it. They're just giving their overall view. They will catch things probably that maybe your normal reader probably won't. And then you want to, so say there's someone, you have a friend who's really into dragons, but maybe he isn't a reader that often, but he knows about the very specific type of dragon that you're talking about in your book. You definitely want him to read that, and so kind of going off of what you hope to get out of it, and also just getting a lot of people to read it. And then I would tend to just get your close knit community, because then like where the book is going. But there are avenues too, like there are Facebook groups that you can ask people. My group that I host, you know people will bring in their book, and while they can't read the entire book, they'll read 1,000 pages in that setting. And it's really nice because we read it out loud. And while it's nerve-wracking for the author, because a lot of them don't really read their books out loud, it's fantastic because they catch things that they would normally not catch because you're reading it out loud.
Right.
And that's why I really stress doing it out loud, even when it's like, oh, well.
So anyway, that's such a fantastic tip.
It's funny because writers, on average, not always, but writers on average tend to be introverts. And so the idea of networking is terrifying. But the thing is you have to think, like, when you go to a writing conference or when you go to a group of writers, while you might be terrified, think about how terrified everyone else is. Even if they are senior members in a group and they've been there for years and years, they're probably still terrified to meet you because you're new, And so, like, it's okay, because just know that, you have a common interest, writing. You can start out with that. And if you go into a group, then you're probably going to be in a setting where there's probably a host who's, if you are being a little quiet and you feel nervous, you can go up to them, or maybe they'll even come up to you and ask you how they can, help you. But yeah, I highly stress going to those places and going to conferences. You could even just, I know it sounds really hard, but going up to people and just asking them what they write at a writing conference, maybe they will feel that they'll get like nervous or something. And then, if the conversation doesn't go anywhere, that's fine. But if they start talking to you, then maybe you make a friend. Then maybe you go to that workshop with them, and suddenly now you have this network, and they know other writers, and now you have people
Right.
who
That's
potentially
true.
will buy your book or like read your story as a beta reader. So yeah, I highly stress networking because it's an oversaturated writing community. It's hard. You have to get noticed for people to care. And that's like a harsh truth. But I don't think it makes it impossible. I just think it's one of those realities that we have to face. Like, you just make a lot of friends and you talk about your book and they talk about their book, because you have to let them talk about their book too, right? And then
Writers love to talk about their book. All you have to do, like you said, is walk up to them and say, "Tell me about the book you're writing," and they'll go on and on and on. And then
yeah,
even if you don't get a word in edgewise, when you walk away, they'll go, "That was the nicest person," because you let them talk about their book. Little
exactly.
little life tip there. People love to talk
Mhm.
about the things that they're passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just, yeah, even just asking them, yeah, just ask them about their book, let them talk, and then Facebook them, go on Instagram, or, wherever you are. Cause yeah, it's all about making friends. So, and that's how you get beta readers. Long story short.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic tip. And speaking of telling us about your writing projects, tell us what you're working on.
Yeah. So I'm constantly working on lots of things, but the two that I'm going to have out and published here in the next several months, um, one is called Quincy's Questions, and that is a book that I'm just helping the author and the illustrator get to, to a point of publishing and, marketing. And I'm doing all that stuff for them. And it's just been a really fun process. And that is a children's book about this little puppy who goes around and asks his mom, like, hey, why is this person different, or why is this dog different? So not only do you learn about the dog breed, but you get to understand that even though it's a different dog, they're doing the same thing as me, so they're okay, because they're actually the same. Even though they're different, we can be friends. It's like, so it's teaching kids that it's okay to be different.
I love
And
that. That's so cute.
yeah,
And
and
I'll put down the website, the URL up above so you can see that.
yes, Quincy's Questions. And yeah, just contact me on there if you have any questions on that. It's going to be May 10th when that is scheduled to release. And then Collective Darkness, I have.
So May 10th happens to be
Yes, Mother's Day.
Mother's Day. So it's timed perfectly for Mother's Day. And as a marketer, I get all excited about timing books and genres with holidays. And so that's perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
Love it.
And then we have the
opposite extreme of a child's book is your next project.
Yep. Yeah, because Collective Darkness is a horror anthology, and rather being aimed at, young mothers and toddlers, the horror anthology is aimed at, young adult men and women who happen to really enjoy horror. And so that one is that's scheduled to be released in September. We don't have an exact date yet. I am one of the writers in that, but I'm also the one who's head of the project, who's going to be, bringing this to light, who's marketing it, who grabbed all the cover art, we will have an audiobook of that. Almost all of the authors will be reading their own story. There are a few who won't be, but that, that's just fine. But yeah, that's going to be timed at the same time to release as the book. We will be doing some conferences here soon and a Kickstarter, and that's going to all happen in the next few months.
Yes. And before we go, tell everybody about the free gift that you have for them.
Yeah, so the free gift is going to be about the 6-story structure. So if you want to know more about that, I'm going to give that to you. You just have to go onto my website at editingme.com, go to the bottom, and you'll see that there's a free gift. And right there, you just sign up. If you don't see the email, just make sure to check your spam folder and then whitelist us. And then from that, you will, accept that. And then I'll only ever send you information that is, for the editing or story or events only of Editing Me. It's not going to be, your information won't be sold anywhere. It's like very safe. But yes. So, and then that'll give you information. Yeah.
Good to know. Well, and thank you for sharing that gift. Yes. All right. So your last final parting advice for writers who would love to be published someday. What tips can you leave us with?
Well, there's 3. 1, slow down. Okay. You don't have to get it out next week. And, it's one of those things, sometimes you just can't do that chapter. So just take a break, take a few days off, or, have a fresh pair of eyes, look at it and help get you ideas, but don't feel stressed because it's your baby. It's your joy. You should take your time and really refine it. And with that comes number 2 is edit, edit, and edit. Just edit so much. Don't publish it without letting other people edit it too, or at least have one other person look at it, because I have seen very smart people post things or publish things that have not been edited by anyone else, and it really doesn't look good. Unfortunately, they'll have just grammatical issues or even formatting issues, like little things that would have been just caught immediately by someone else who had fresh eyes, were not caught. So just edit, beta read, and then just make sure, just have fun with it. Don't let it, even though it's a business, because it's the act of writing into publishing and all that it's fun. It's supposed to be a fun thing, so make sure to have
fun. That's really good advice. And maybe from a marketing standpoint, from how I look at things, when you're writing, in my experience, a lot of writers tend to edit while they're writing, and then they lose that creative flow, and then they get stressed out like you're talking about. So just start dumping onto your computer or handwrite it, however you do it. Just let that flow. Sometimes my husband will come in. I'm like, I'm in the zone. Don't talk to me. You want to keep that zone going, that creative juices flowing. And then, as you're saying, go back and edit it. And I love the advice to, even if you think you're a grammar Nazi, which I am, I always also have other people edit it, because sometimes stuff goes, I miss it, just like you said. And so important to have another set of eyes, or two or three or four or whatever.
Yeah, honestly, more the merrier. But the thing is don't let them take over your project and don't let them take your voice, because I have some beta readers who try to become editors, but they don't realize the problem with their editing is that they're changing the style. There is a big difference between editing and then changing style. And so make sure that while you read all of those like edits, take all of them with a grain of salt. And if you really don't agree with one, see if it's a common theme. If there's one person who says that this doesn't work, and then like 3 other people also say that that doesn't work, there might be a problem that you need to address. But if only one person says that and no one else has a problem with that, then it's probably okay.
Okay, good tip. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for spending some time with us. And my last little shout out, thank you again for subscribing and spending time with us. Be sure and visit all of Elizabeth's websites, my websites. They're all written up above and down below and sideways and all that kind of stuff. Thank you for spending time with us.
Of course.
You learned something new. Not you, Elizabeth, but those of you who are watching, and that you keep writing. The world wants to hear your voice, and you have something unique to say. So go out there and stop watching YouTube and start writing. No, I shouldn't say that. Watch the video right after this one.
Yeah.
And then start writing.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks again, Liz.
Yep. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.